Hi everyone, Sandman here. This video is brought to you by a donation from Brandon, and here's what he has to say. Hey Sandman, I'm in my late 20s discovering my strength as a lone wolf, but this partial liberation is not without serious scarring. That scarring being in many ways emotional, psychological, as well as spiritual. I'd like to hear your views and information pertaining to the increasing numbers, primarily in Western society, of antisocial personalities, cluster B personalities emerging within our culture. I've walked away from relationships a few months ago because I was dating a female sociopath that nearly caused me to question my reason of existence and worth as a human being. Too many men are played by women, but the real monsters, I believe, are the women that truly have no conscience. We hear about these monsters in the news occasionally, but society has yet to take the steps in correcting anything regarding this issue. Thanks for all you do, and cheers. Well, Brandon, thanks for your donation as well as your topic request. Most of what I'm actually going to be talking about in this video is from an article called Particular Characteristics of Female Sociopaths versus Males, and I put a link to that article in the description below. The first thing to clear up is the difference between sociopaths and psychopaths. Sociopaths are like chameleons because they have the ability to blend in with their surroundings and society, and as we all know, women are better social chameleons than men are. I don't think that there are more sociopathic women in society today than there were in the past. I just believe that women are free to say what they want today, increasingly without consequences. The dark side of female sociopaths is very different than the dark side of male ones. Some of the male ones become serial killers with a sexual spin, while the female ones tend to become nurses and quietly smother you while you're sleeping in your hospital bed. The article I mentioned also says this, and I quote, Beverly Atlet, a 23-year-old nurse in the UK, killed 4 and attacked 9 other children within a couple of months before she was caught. A Texas nurse, Janine Jones, is believed to have killed between 10 and 46. It's of this group of people that people usually say, but they seem like such nice people. Another subset are those who kill one or several husbands for the inheritance and life insurance. Brandon, sociopathic women are not only found in Western countries. I've read many cases of female sociopaths and serial killers in Asian countries as well. I think the reason that today there are more sociopaths in society has to do with the fact that people aren't being brought up by their parents anymore. The article also mentions this, and I quote, Some female sociopaths demonstrate antisocial behavior as children and as adolescents. Lying, stealing, truancy, cruelty to animals and siblings, drug abuse, early sexual activity, and of course there are many frequent run-ins with the law. Their parents are very often distraught because there is so little that can be done. As adults, these female sociopaths may end up abusing alcohol and drugs and end up in and out of prison. Some therapists believe that there is such a disregard for society among them that a sociopath that has basically broken the law just hasn't been found out yet. There you have it, folks. The author of this article wants to blame sociopathic women and not their parents. But I also believe that poor parenting is responsible for many of these actions. Lying, stealing, cruelty to siblings, and alcohol abuse, as well as early sexual activity, can be attributed to most of the women that I've dated in the past. In the past, these women would have been disciplined by their parents and forced to comply to social norms, whereas today they would simply end up with no husbands and become the parents' burden. Can you imagine trying to pass your sociopathic daughter off to a husband in the past if she was misbehaving herself? It simply wouldn't have happened then because relationships are based on two families coming together instead of two people falling in love. Another reason you're probably running into these women, Brandon, is because you're in your late 20s, and I'm sure that you're dating women in their mid to late 20s, and unfortunately by this point in life, most of the relatively sane women have already been paired off or are too busy riding the cock carousel. Unfortunately, because most women today start having sex very early in their teens, by the time they get into their mid-20s, their legs fold open like a cheap suitcase. Another really interesting thing about this article is that it mentions that psychopathic women often lead destructive cults, and this could perfectly explain the rise of feminism. The article mentions that such women target women that they actually want to get away from sex, and these sociopaths target women that also want to lose weight. And as we all know, typical feminists are overweight, and as a result, sexless. Cults are also basically able to get people to feel that they're in control of their own lives, and what better excuse than to actually tell women, if they aren't in control, then the patriarchy is really oppressing them and controlling them. Then you can easily sell to them feminist ideals because you're basically selling them empowerment. That being said, and myself having met feminist leaders in the past, I will admit that they are extremely angry against men and trying to indoctrinate other women to feel the same way. Misery Loves Company, and I'm not talking about the book by Stephen King. Although the character in that particular book, ironically, was a sociopath, and I also believe a nurse. And Valerie Solanas, the woman that shot Andy Warhol, was also responsible for the Feminist Manifesto, and she was also a killer. Unfortunately, as you get older, Brandon, and you continue dating women, the number of sociopaths that cross your path will simply continue to grow. In the past, what we would have considered socialized sociopaths had to work harder to hide their behaviors. But women today are considered the victims, even when they are the aggressors. And we all have dated women that don't seem to be affected by their emotions when they're dealing with us. That's because they're emotionally stunted. The scary thing is that women generally believe that they're smarter than men because they more easily have the ability to disconnect from their actions and their emotions. And they probably see themselves as superior because of this. Such women have also spent a great deal of time learning to mimic the emotions of others. You're right about your observations because most women these days behave prim and proper during the honeymoon phase of the relationship, but the moment they know that you're in love with them, the sociopath comes out. They never felt anything like this for you before, they just projected the illusion that they did. They will lie to you, become parasitic, and seek out control in the relationship. To me, that sounds like most women in most relationships today. And that's why I believe that most women these days are absolutely obsessed with conforming to social norms because that allows them to cover their inner sociopath from sight. Most women are absolutely obsessed with appearing to obey the social norms and behaviors found around them and trying to appear as normal as possible because inside we know that they aren't. The reason society sees more male sociopaths and psychopaths is because men have a harder time conforming to what society expects of us. So that's why they're 7 times more likely to show up. But my general rule of thumb is that all women are sociopaths until they're proven otherwise. I've yet to meet a woman that doesn't lie, manipulate, or use their own children against their husbands. Even what I would consider the best mothers try to turn their sons and daughters against their fathers. That could also explain why women are harder to deal with in their teenage years. Men, on the other hand, when we fall in love, we become like gentle pussycats. If nature didn't make us this way, then we would be too dangerous for our partners as well as our offspring. Many women don't have a conscience when it comes to taking advantage of their husbands, divorcing them, and then just using them for their resources. The only reason I believe a woman wouldn't do this is if it actually couldn't backfire in her face. That's why the world before no-fault divorce kept the female sociopath under control. If she destroyed her husband, it was difficult, if not impossible, for her to find another. So the best interests of her husband and children were also her own best interests. At the moment, feminism makes it about women against men, and unleashed a great evil upon the world. A woman's dark ghosts are basically trapped inside of her like Slimer in a trap in Ghostbusters. When the divorce laws changed, Slimer got loose and started devouring the dessert tray, much the same way that feminists do. This article also mentions that the female sociopath will speak to her own children and get information about the father, and then use the data against him. The article says that this is sociopathic behavior, but I believe that this is just in the best interests of women in general. She has to ensure that the child takes her side because she will probably need him when she gets too old to take care of herself, and that kid becomes her survival strategy. It's a biological adaptation. In return, she'll continue to nurture and take care of the grandchildren, in most cases as a form of exchange. She goes from sex object to mother and then finally to babysitter. In all 3 stages, she has a man to take care of her. First her father, then her husband, and finally her son or son-in-law. Nature has designed women to be the perfect parasite on 3 generations of men. With regards to cluster B personalities, the paranoid personality disorder is pretty obvious. I mentioned before that the less bad things happen to women in society, the more paranoid they get. The less rapes there are, the more women are obsessed with being raped. Schizoid personality disorder is characterized by desire for a solitary or sheltered lifestyle. People with this disorder also tend to be apathetic and secretive. Again, this describes many women that you'll meet these days. All women that I've met have generally been secretive about their desires to rule over men and extract resources. They're absolutely ruthless and don't let their emotions get in the way. If women let their feelings get the better of them, then we wouldn't have made it this far with regards to evolution. The third disorder in that cluster is called schizotypal personality disorder, and it's characterized by severe social anxiety as well as paranoia. If you're a female chameleon, it makes perfect sense that you would be paranoid about being found out, and it would make you socially anxious and you would constantly look over your shoulder to see if people found out that you were a fraud. All of these disorders describe normal human behaviors without order and discipline imposed on people. I get the feeling that the medical establishment makes up all of these conditions in an attempt to make more money. For example, when a child has their father in their life, they tend to be less likely to become criminals. But without that male influence and only a single mother to raise them, the odds are actually greater that they'll end up in prison. Would you consider that mental illness, or would you consider that social degradation? So many of our supposed mental conditions today are caused by people not being raised properly. Brandon, that's why you're actually seeing an increase in women with cluster B personality disorders. That's my theory anyways. That's why going your own way makes perfect sense, because so many women these days are not raised properly and are behaving like sociopaths. And there's no real way for us to put the genie back in the bottle at this point without raising an entirely new generation with stable social values. If our society collapses centuries from now, we will look back and hopefully connect it to social Marxism. That's the great tragedy of our time, the destruction of our social order and our civilization that we work so hard to build. We're so obsessed with labeling people that we aren't even aware of the real problems, and if we structured society differently, things would improve. There will always be sociopaths and psychopaths in our society, and there's nothing we can do about it. All we can do is build social structure to manage that human condition. Unfortunately, today we're more obsessed with technology and consumption, so we're forgetting the basic components of human interaction. I'm sure that some of you will disagree with what I have to say, but many more will realize that humans in the past were far more clever when it comes to socialization. We have forgotten what they have learned and thrown into the garbage bin. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for today. Thanks again, Brandon, for your donation as well as your topic. And don't forget to check out today's MGTOW mystery link. As for everyone else out there, please follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook to get tomorrow's video today. Thanks for taking your daily dose of red pills. And remember, a red pill a day keeps Kathy Bates away. So enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.